Back in 1974, a family of 7 would suddenly be reduced to just one surviving member. With a .35 caliber lever-action hunting rifle in hand, Butch went from room to room, murdering his family members brutally one by one as they were sleeping. It's no secret that many popular movies, shows, and books borrow and are inspired by real-life events, and Netflix's Stranger Things is no exception. Today we're going to focus on the chilling true story behind the Vecna and Creel family storyline in the 4th season of Stranger Things. George and Kathleen Lutz had recently married, and they decided to start their new phase of life by relocating to the small town of Amityville in New York. It was 1975 when they bought a colonial house in that area for just $80,000. George knew exactly why this property was such a bargain. It had been empty ever since the last family who had lived there had met their gruesome and untimely end. But despite the dark history and the tragic incidents that happened there, he could not refuse the deal. As the Lutzes were moving in, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was on trial for the atrocious murders of his parents and 4 siblings. Just 28 days after moving in, the Lutz family would flee the house in terror, leaving all their earthly possessions behind and never looking back. They claimed that their house was haunted by malicious spirits.
It is probably one of the most haunted homes in the world. It's certainly one of the most publicized haunted homes in the world.
George claimed that he experienced intense changes in his mood and that he became surly and angry towards his family. He would wake up every night at 3 a.m. right around the time the murders of the previous family occurred. One night, he claimed to have been standing in the yard and he saw a horrifying half-man, half-pig-like creature with glowing red eyes, staring at him from one of his upstairs windows.
There were too many things that had happened and were going on to sit there in denial that something wasn't right with this.
The family also claimed that they had seen green slime seeping from the walls and experienced cold spots in particular places of the residence. Even a priest who came to bless the home claimed to have heard an angry male voice telling him to get out. The priest also said that shortly after leaving the house, he experienced stigmata and developed blisters all over his body. After the Lutz family fled their home, less than a month after moving in, they cashed in on their experience by publishing a book which would go on to inspire countless movies.
Their story was the subject of a media frenzy, turned them into celebrities, and became a worldwide bestseller, The Amityville Horror.
So what happened before the Lutzes moved in? Back in 1974, a family of 7 would suddenly be reduced to just one surviving member. Before that fateful night, the DeFeo was not exactly a happy household, with rumors of Ronald Sr. being antagonistic, arrogant, and dominant. He was also a strong authority figure who got into heated arguments with his wife and children. Their eldest son, Butch, who was held in high regard, was the most frequently abused. It only grew worse at school when the overweight and moody boy was subjected to constant teasing from his peers. As he grew older, Butch began to physically attack his father and his few friends. His family began to worry and took him to see a psychiatrist, but the visits irritated Butch, who insisted he didn't need any help. The trips to the doctor ended, and the DeFeos replaced them with cash and gifts, including a $14,000 speedboat in the hopes that the gifts would appease their troubled son. But the new strategy worsened the problem. By the age of 17, Butch had become an LSD and heroin user and had been expelled from school for his violent outbursts.
Ronnie was, put it this way, a wild teenager.
He had a reputation for using drugs, for violence, for fighting with his father.
He was a punk. All he did was drink, gamble, and fight.
The DeFeos gave their son rewards despite his academic shortcomings. He earned a coveted position at his grandfather's auto dealership at the age of 18 with almost no expectations. Regardless of his attendance or job performance, he also received a weekly stipend from his father. Butch spent his money on his new car, which was another gift from his parents, as well as on drugs, alcohol, and firearms. His odd behavior seemed to get stranger over time. During a hunting trip, he threatened a friend with a rifle, but later that day he pretended nothing had ever happened. During a quarrel between his parents, he also made an attempt to use a 12-gauge shotgun to kill his father. At point-blank range, he pulled the trigger, but the gun misfired. His astonished father ended the argument, but the confrontation left him speechless. This occurrence hinted the forthcoming of more violent events. In the early hours of November the 13th, 1974, Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. snapped. With a .35 caliber lever-action hunting rifle in hand, Butch went from room to room, murdering his family members brutally one by one as they were sleeping. All the killings occurred within a 15-minute period. He then took a shower, got ready for work, and put the murder weapon and his bloody clothes in a pillowcase. On his way to the dealership for work at 6 in the morning, he dropped the evidence in a storm drain.
We were really a close family, you know. It's a shame what happened, but it happened.
Butch pretended not to know the reason for his father's absence when he called home after arriving to work. Around midday, he claimed he was bored and left work to spend the day with friends. He made an effort to establish an alibi by informing each person he met that he couldn't manage to reach anyone at home. Later that very same day, he entered a bar and shouted, "You gotta help me! I think my mother and father are shot!"
The Oscar goes to...
When a group of people went to his house with him, they found the dead bodies of the family face down in their beds, shot to death, and covered in their own blood. One of the men in the group was Butch's friend named Joe Yeswit. Joe called the Suffolk County Police Department. When the officials arrived, they searched the entire house. The victims of the mass murder included Ronald DeFeo Sr., Louise DeFeo, and Butch's 4 siblings: Dawn, aged 18, Allison, aged 13, Mark, aged 12, and John Matthew, aged 9. When the police interrogated Butch, he mentioned that the murders might have been done by a mafia hitman, and that he himself might have been the real target. Police took Butch into the police station for his own protection. However, his testimony took a nosedive as authorities conducted a more thorough investigation of the family's home. Authorities were concerned when they discovered an empty box for a recently acquired .35 caliber Marlin rifle in Butch's room. The killings couldn't have occurred earlier in the day because the family was still in their pajamas. So as the timeline came together, it became more likely that they had occurred early in the morning, placing Butch at home during the murders. The police found significant holes in his story. Soon after answering some questions of the investigators, Butch broke down and confessed that he had committed all the murders. He further told the investigators that once he started killing his family, he couldn't stop. It all went so fast. Butch also admitted that he took a bath and redressed after killing his family. He told officers where he had discarded the evidence, including the bloodstained clothes as well as the murder weapon. Neighbors were flabbergasted to see dead bodies being removed from the property, and the peace and quiet of their modest suburban neighborhood had been shattered. The town would never be quite the same again. At the trial, Butch did not deny killing his family, but he still pled not guilty and presented a defense based on insanity. Butch said that he experienced the abusive behavior of his father that led him to kill all the members of the family. He further claimed that he had heard voices telling him that his family was plotting against him. He claimed that he believed that if he did not kill his parents and siblings first, then they would murder him. A psychologist for the defense backed up his claims, but the prosecution's psychologist could not agree to this story. He stated for the record that Butch was a drug addict with a history of heroin and LSD use, and that he might very well have a disruptive personality disorder, but that he was entirely aware and in control of his actions during the horrific crimes and was therefore responsible for his actions.
You need to be locked in prison for a very long time. You are a danger to society.
The court agreed, and on November 21st, 1975, Butch was found guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive prison terms of 25 years to life, one for each of his family members. He was held at the Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, New York. All of his appeals and requests to the parole board were denied until he died. While he was in jail, Butch gave many interviews where he constantly denied that he had killed his parents and siblings. He eventually died in prison at the age of 69 on the 12th of March 2021. So, what do you think? Was it ultimately the parents' fault for enabling their son's increasingly worrying behavior that led to their death? Or was Butch just a broken individual who, regardless of what his parents did, would eventually fall into the same fate of ending his entire family? Let me know in the comments below, and if you're into true crime and mystery, click here and I'll catch you in this video.